The morning started like any other on the human colony of New Sol. Orbiting the distant star Kepler 442, Administrator Wu Jin sat at his desk, sipping his third cup of synthetic coffee while sorting through the daily communication logs. Outside, his office window, the purple-tinted sky of the alien world stretched endlessly, dotted with the silver gleam of orbital stations. Wu Jin had been managing communications for the colony for 8 years now. It was quiet work, mostly handling supply requests from mining operations and keeping in touch with other human settlements scattered across this arm of the galaxy. Nothing exciting ever happened in his department. That was exactly how he liked. His computer chimed softly, indicating a new message had arrived through the quantum relay network. Wu Jin glanced at the screen and saw it was marked as urgent priority. He frowned slightly and opened the transmission. The message was short and direct. Require immediate military assistance. Facing extinction-level threat. Coordinates attached. Will provide significant compensation for aid. Time is critical. Wu Jin leaned back in his chair and scratched his head. The message came through the standard human communication channels, but something felt odd about the language. It was too formal, too precise. Most colony administrators he knew would have added more details or at least mentioned which pirate group was causing trouble. He checked the origin point of the message. The coordinates showed it came from a system about 47 light-years away in a sector he had never heard of before. That was strange, but not impossible. New human settlements were being established all the time, often in remote areas, where they could mine rare minerals without interference. The mention of extinction-level threat made Wu Jin pause. That was serious language. Most pirate attacks were hit-and-run affairs, designed to steal cargo rather than destroy entire colonies. But maybe this group was different. Maybe they were dealing with something worse than usual pirates. Wu Jin opened his database and tried to find records of the settlement that had sent the message. He searched for colony registrations, mining permits, and exploration licenses for that sector. Nothing came up. That was unusual, but not unheard of. Some settlements operated without proper paperwork, especially in the Outer Rim territories. He tried a different approach and searched for recent pirate activity reports in that area. Again, nothing appeared in his files. The entire sector seemed to be a blank spot in human records. Either it was a very new settlement or his database was missing information. Wu Jin drummed his fingers on his desk, thinking, the smart thing to do would be to request more information from the sender. Ask for colony identification codes, details about the threat they were facing, and confirmation of their human status. But the message had said time was critical. If people were really facing an extinction-level threat, every minute of delay could cost lives. On the other hand, sending military forces to an unknown location based on a vague distress call was risky. What if it was a trap? What if pirates were trying to lure human ships into an ambush? Wu Jin had heard stories of such tricks being used in the frontier regions. He stared at the message for several minutes, weighing his options. The formal language still bothered him, but maybe the sender was just stressed. People under attack often didn't communicate clearly, and the promise of significant compensation suggested they had valuable resources worth protecting. Finally, Wu Jin made his decision. If there was even a chance that human lives were in danger, he had to act. He would forward the message to Earth Defense Command and let them decide how to respond. They had better intelligence networks and could verify the situation before sending ships. He opened a new transmission and began typing his report to headquarters. Received urgent distress call from remote settlement. Coordinates indicate location in unexplored sector. Request immediate investigation and possible military response. Threat level appears high based on sender's language. Wu Jin paused and read over his message. He decided to add more details to help the military planners understand the situation. Settlement claims to face extinction-level threat. No details provided about enemy forces. Sender promises significant compensation for assistance. Recommend fast response if situation is genuine. He attached the original distress call to his report and marked it with moderate priority. Not the highest level since he wasn't completely certain about the threat, but high enough to ensure it would be reviewed quickly by the right people. Before sending the message, Wu Jin tried one more time to contact the original sender. He composed a brief reply. Message received. Military assistance being arranged. Please provide more details about your situation and enemy forces. What is your colony designation? He sent both messages through the quantum relay network and sat back to wait. If the distressed settlement was real, they should respond quickly with more information. If it was some kind of trap or false alarm, the lack of response would tell him everything he needed to know. Hours passed without any reply from the unknown settlement. Wu Jin began to worry that he might have made a mistake. Maybe the situation was even worse than the original message had suggested. Maybe the settlement had already been overrun and destroyed. Before they could provide more details, he checked his communication logs repeatedly, hoping to see a new message appear. Nothing came through. The silence was troubling, but it could mean many things. Perhaps their communication equipment had been damaged. Perhaps they were too busy fighting to send detailed reports. Or perhaps the worst had already happened. By the end of his shift, Wu Jin still had not received any response from the mysterious settlement. He left detailed notes for the night shift supervisor, asking them to watch for any follow-up messages. He also sent a brief update to Earth Defense Command, informing them that the original sender had not provided additional details. Wu Jin walked home through the bustling streets of New Seoul Colony. He couldn't shake the feeling that something important had happened today. The strange message, with its formal language and vague threats, felt different from the usual administrative tasks he handled. Something about it nagged at the back of his mind. He tried to push the worry away as he entered his small apartment. There was nothing more he could do tonight. He had followed proper procedures and forwarded the message to the appropriate authorities. If there really was a human settlement in danger, Earth Defense Command would send help. If it was a false alarm or a trap, they would figure that out too. Wu Jin prepared a simple dinner and tried to relax, but his thoughts kept returning to the distress call. Somewhere out there, beyond the reach of normal human space, someone had sent a desperate plea for help. Whether they were human colonists, pirates, or something else entirely. They claimed to be facing extinction. He had done his job by passing the message along. Now it was up to others to decide how humanity would respond. Wu Jin had no way of knowing that his simple administrative decision would soon change the course of human history and announce their presence to an entire galaxy that had never heard of Earth. The message he had forwarded with moderate priority was already being reviewed by military analysts on Earth. Within hours, it would reach the desk of Fleet Admiral Haijin, and the wheels of the largest military mobilization in human history would begin to turn. All because of one mysterious distress call and a colonial administrator who chose to help rather than ignore a cry for aid. Fleet Admiral Haijin stood before the massive holographic display in the Earth Defense Command Center, watching as red warning lights blinked across a star map showing the outer territories. Her morning briefing had just begun when the urgent message from New Seoul Colony appeared on her priority screen. She read through Wu Jin's report carefully, noting the strange coordinates and the mention of an extinction-level threat. The location was far beyond normal human space, in a region that most maps showed as unexplored. That alone was concerning. What kind of settlement would establish itself so far from support? Intelligence Officer Taeho, what do we know about this sector? Haijin asked, pointing to the coordinates on the display. Taeho quickly pulled up files on his tablet and frowned. Very little, Admiral. The sector was surveyed by long-range probes about 15 years ago, but no settlements were authorized there. The area showed some unusual energy readings, but nothing that suggested immediate value for colonization. Unusual energy readings? Haijin stepped closer to the display. What kind of energy? Unknown types, Admiral. The probe data showed massive power sources moving through the system, but they didn't match any known human or natural phenomena. The Science Division classified it as requiring further investigation, but it was low priority. Haijin nodded slowly. This was getting more interesting. If there were unknown energy sources in that system, it could explain why someone had established an unauthorized settlement there. Mining operations often went to dangerous areas if the potential profits were high enough. What about recent pirate activity in the region? She asked. Communications specialist Diane looked up from her station. We've had reports of increased pirate raids along the Outer Rim, Admiral. Several new groups have appeared in the last 6 months, using ships and weapons we haven't seen before. They seem better organized and more aggressive than typical pirates. Better organized how? They coordinate their attacks across multiple systems simultaneously. They use advanced jamming equipment that blocks standard communications. And they don't just steal cargo, they've been destroying entire mining operations and leaving no survivors. Haijin felt a chill run down her spine. Pirates who left no survivors were dangerous in a completely different way than ordinary criminals. They suggested either military deserters or something worse, possibly foreign agents testing human defenses. How many ships would we need to handle a serious pirate threat in that region? She asked her tactical officer. Commander Yongsu consulted his planning systems. For a standard pirate group, a small task force would be sufficient. But if they have advanced weapons and ships, and if they're threatening an entire settlement with extinction, we might need a full battle group. Haijin walked around the holographic display, studying the tactical situation. The unknown settlement was isolated, far from any possible reinforcement. If pirates had found them, they could take their time destroying everything. A small rescue force might arrive too late or be overwhelmed by superior numbers. What's our... You are in fleet status? She asked. We have 47 ships ready for immediate deployment, Admiral. The first battle group is conducting training exercises near Jupiter, and the second battle group is on patrol duty near the Centauri colonies. We could assemble a significant force within 12 hours. Haijin considered her options. Sending a large fleet to investigate a single distress call might seem like overkill, but the alternative was potentially letting an entire human settlement be destroyed. The mention of extinction-level threat suggested the situation was already desperate. There's another factor to consider, Intelligence Officer Teho said quietly. If these pirates have access to advanced technology and they're operating in unexplored space, they might have found something valuable out there. Something worth fighting for. What do you mean? The energy readings from 15 years ago, Admiral? What if they found the source? What if that's why the pirates are so well equipped? Unknown technology falling into the wrong hands could threaten all human colonies. That possibility changed everything. Haijin had been thinking about rescuing a remote settlement, but Teho was suggesting they might be dealing with a strategic threat to human security. If pirates had found alien technology or some other advanced resource, they could use it to launch attacks throughout human space. How long would it take to reach those coordinates with a full battle group? She asked. Commander Yongsu worked quickly on his calculations. Approximately 4 days at maximum hyperspace speed, Admiral. But deploying that many ships would leave our inner defenses weaker. Not if we make this a training exercise, Haijin said, making her decision. We'll call it Operation Steel Shield, a long-range training mission to test our rapid deployment capabilities. The public will see it as routine military preparation, but we'll have our full strength available if the situation is worse than expected. She turned to address the entire command center. I want the first and second battle groups prepared for immediate deployment. Full combat loadout, but officially this is a training exercise. We'll also need Marine units ready for ground operations, in case we need to evacuate civilians. What about medical support? Asked Chief Medical Officer Dr. Hai Young from her station. Include 3 hospital ships and full trauma teams. If we're dealing with refugees from a destroyed settlement, they'll need immediate medical care. The command center burst into activity as officers began implementing Haijin's orders. Within minutes, communication signals were flashing out to ships across the solar system, calling crews back from leave and preparing vessels for departure. General So Young, the commander of Earth's Marine Forces, appeared on the main screen via video link from her headquarters on Mars. Admiral, I understand you need ground forces for this operation? That's correct, General. We might be dealing with a hostile occupation of a human settlement. I need your best units ready for combat operations in unknown terrain. How many troops are we talking about? 12,000 Marines with full support equipment. This could be anything from a simple evacuation to a major assault against well-armed pirates. General So-Young nodded grimly. I'll deploy the 3rd Marine Division. They're experienced in rapid assault operations and hostile environment combat. They can be ready in 6 hours. As the preparations continued, Hyjin found herself looking at the star map again. Something about this situation felt different from routine pirate activity. The formal language of the distress message, the remote location, the mention of extinction-level threats, it all suggested they were walking into something bigger than a simple rescue mission. Captain Jun-Ho of the Experimental AI Warfare Division approached her station. Admiral, request permission to deploy the new tactical AI systems with the fleet. If we're facing unknown technology, our adaptive combat systems might give us an advantage. Granted. But keep the AI systems on standby until we know what we're dealing with. I don't want to risk them in the first engagement. Hyjin looked around the bustling command center one more time. In just 2 hours, her routine morning briefing had turned into the largest military deployment in recent human history. 47 warships, 12,000 Marines, and the most advanced technology humanity could field, all because of one mysterious distress call from the edge of known space. She had no way of knowing that the settlement they were rushing to save wasn't human at all. That the extinction-level threat was real, but came from an enemy that had never encountered humans before. And that this rescue mission would announce humanity's arrival on the galactic stage in the most dramatic way possible. The fleet would depart within hours, carrying the hopes and strength of humanity into the unknown. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation, 47 warships materializing in the darkness of unknown space. Admiral Hyjin stood on the bridge of the flagship UES Incheon, expecting to see a human colony under attack by pirates. Instead, her tactical display lit up with readings that made no sense at all. Admiral, I'm detecting massive energy signatures throughout the system, reported Sensor Officer Minho, his voice tight with confusion. These aren't matching any ships in our database. On the main screen, the system revealed itself in all its alien glory. A blue-green planet hung in space, surrounded by orbital structures that looked nothing like human construction. But that wasn't what made everyone on the bridge stare in shock. It was the ships, enormous vessels filled the space. Around the planet, some easily 3 times the size of Earth's largest dreadnoughts. But they weren't made of metal and composites like human ships. They seemed to be alive, with flowing organic curves and surfaces that pulsed with bioluminescent patterns. Some had tentacle-like appendages that moved independently, while others displayed rows of what looked like massive teeth. Those aren't pirates, whispered Communications Officer Da-Yun. Those aren't even human ships. Admiral Hyjin felt her stomach drop as the reality of the situation hit her. They had responded to what they thought was a distress call from human colonists, but they had instead stumbled into what appeared to be an alien war. The formal language of the original message suddenly made sense. It hadn't been written by humans at all. Admiral, we're receiving multiple signals, Da-Yun reported, working frantically at her console. Some are coming from the planet's surface, others from ships near the planet. And there are different signals coming from the larger ships, the aggressive-looking ones. Can you translate any of it? The universal translation protocols are working on it now. It might take a few minutes to establish meaningful communication. Captain Du-Hyen of the UES Bizen appeared on a side screen. Admiral, my tactical officer, reports that some of those large ships are moving toward the planet in attack formation. Whatever's happening here, it looks like we arrived in the middle of a battle. Before Hyjin could respond, one of the massive organic ships turned toward the human fleet. Its surface rippled and changed color, shifting from dark green to angry red. Weapon ports that looked like giant mouths opened along its hull, revealing rows of crystalline teeth that began to glow with deadly energy. "Evasive maneuvers," Hyjin ordered. "All ships prepare for combat but do not fire unless fired upon." "We don't know who the good guys are yet." The alien ship fired first, launching what appeared to be living projectiles toward the human fleet. The organic missiles twisted and turned through space like swimming creatures adapting their course to track the human ships even as they tried to dodge. "Shields up!" Commander Yongsu shouted. "Return fire authorized." The UES Inchin's main guns fired back, sending streams of plasma toward the attacking vessel. The shots struck the organic hull, but instead of exploding, they seemed to be absorbed. The alien ship's surface rippled like water, then hardened again, apparently undamaged. "Our weapons aren't working," reported Weapons Officer Sujin. "Their hull is adapting to our energy signatures." More of the massive organic ships began turning toward the human fleet, apparently seeing them as a new threat to eliminate. But before they could fire, other voices filled the communication channels. Desperate, hopeful voices speaking in a completely different language. "Translation coming through now," Dayun announced. "Admiral, we're getting signals from the planet and some of the smaller ships. They're thanking us for coming. They say they sent the distress call and can't believe we actually responded." Admiral Hyjin stared at the tactical display, trying to understand the situation. "So the smaller ships and the planet are the ones who called for help? And the big organic ships are their enemies? That appears to be correct, Admiral. The smaller ships are moving to protect us from the large ones. I think we accidentally joined someone else's war." On the screen, the smaller alien vessels were indeed moving between the human fleet and the attacking organic ships. Their technology looked completely different from both human and organic designs. Crystalline structures with flowing energy. Patterns beautiful but clearly artificial rather than grown. "We need to establish communication with whoever called for help," Hyjin decided. "Dune, focus all translation resources on the friendlies. I want to talk to them right now." "Working. On it, Admiral." "The language is complex, but the universal protocols are making progress." While Dayun worked on communications, the battle continued around them. The organic ships, which the tactical computer had labeled as hostiles, continued their assault on both the planet and the smaller defending ships. Their weapons were unlike anything in human experience, firing what appeared to be living creatures that burrowed into enemy hulls and began eating them from the inside. "Admiral, I've got a clear communication link," Dayun reported. "Patching it through now." The main screen flickered, then showed the image of an alien that looked nothing like any creature from Earth. It had 6 arms, skin that seemed to be made of overlapping plant-like scales and large eyes that showed unmistakable intelligence and desperation. "Humans," the alien said, the universal translator giving it a calm, elderly voice despite its obvious stress. "You came. We cannot believe. You came. I am Elder Bomni of the Vorthic Confederation. We sent a distress call, but we did not know your species. Yet you brought a fleet to help strangers." Admiral Hyjin stepped forward. "Elder Bomni, I am Admiral Hyjin of the Earth Defense Fleet. We received your distress call and came to provide assistance. But I must ask, what exactly are we dealing with here?" The Krex Empire," Bomni replied, gesturing toward the organic ships with one of her 6 arms. "They have been conquering our worlds for 3 years. They destroy everything that is not like them. We are the last free world of our people. When we sent the call for mercenary help, we expected perhaps 1 or 2 ships. We never imagined an entire fleet would come to save beings you had never met." The situation was becoming clearer, but it was far more complex than Hyjin had expected. "Mercenary help? Elder Bomni, I think there may have been a misunderstanding. We thought we were responding to a human colony under attack." "Human?" Bomni looked confused. "We sent our call through established mercenary channels. Many species provide military assistance for payment. We assumed you were experienced warriors for hire." Engineer Chang Min, who had been listening to the conversation while analyzing the enemy ships, suddenly looked up from his console. Admiral, I've been studying the organic ship's defensive systems. They're incredibly advanced. Their hulls adapt to weapon frequencies in real time. But there's a pattern to the adaptation. It takes exactly 3.7 seconds for their armor to adjust to new energy signatures. Can we exploit that? If we constantly change our weapon frequencies faster than they can adapt, yes. But it would require precise timing across the entire fleet. Meanwhile, the Krek ships were pressing their attack harder, apparently angered by the arrival of unknown reinforcements. One of the massive organic vessels launched a barrage of living missiles toward a group of Vorthic defenders. Elder Bomyi, Admiral Hyjin said, making a decision that would change galactic history. We may have come here by mistake, but we're here now. And we don't abandon people who need help, whether they're human or not. Can your people coordinate? With our ships? The alien's large eyes widened with what looked like amazement. You would fight for us? Even though you gain nothing from our survival? That's what we do, Hyjin replied simply. Commander Yong-Su, prepare all ships for coordinated assault. We're going to show these Kreks what human tactics look like. The battle began worse than Admiral Hyjin could have imagined. The first human ships to engage the Kreks bio-vessels fired their most powerful weapons, expecting to see the familiar explosions and debris that marked successful hits. Instead, their plasma beams and missile strikes simply disappeared into the organic hulls, absorbed like water into a sponge. Direct hit on the lead Krek ship, reported Weapons Officer Sujin from her station. No visible damage. Their hull is adapting to our weapon signatures faster than expected. On the tactical display, the massive Kreks vessels continued their advance toward the planet, seemingly unbothered by human firepower. Their living weapons returned fire with devastating effect. Organic projectiles that looked like giant sea creatures swam through space, wrapping around human ships and beginning to eat through their armor plating. Captain Duhain's voice crackled over the communication system from the UES Bizan. Admiral, we're taking heavy damage. These creatures are boring through our hull. They're actually eating our ship. The UES Daegu, one of the smaller human destroyers, suddenly went dark as a swarm of bioweapons overwhelmed its defenses. Admiral Hyjin watched in horror as the ship's hull began to dissolve under the organic assault. All ships, emergency withdrawal to defensive positions, she ordered, her mind racing to find a solution. We need a new strategy immediately. But even as the human fleet pulled back, something unexpected happened. The Krek ships seemed confused by the retreat. Their biomechanical computers had calculated that the humans would continue their futile, direct assault until destroyed. As most species did when facing overwhelming Krek superiority, Colonel Hyan Wu, the fleet's tactical coordinator, noticed the enemy hesitation first. Admiral, the Krek ships are slowing their advance. I think our withdrawal surprised them. How is that possible? Their tactics are perfectly coordinated, like they're following a predetermined pattern. Maybe they don't adapt well to unexpected behavior. Engineer Chang Min, who had been frantically analyzing combat data, suddenly straightened at his console. Admiral, I've got it. The 3.7-second adaptation cycle. We can use it against them, but not the way I first thought. Explain quickly. Instead of trying to cycle through different weapon frequencies, we need to make each ship fire at completely random intervals. Their adaptive systems are designed to predict patterns, but they can't adapt to pure chaos. Admiral Hyjin grasped the concept immediately. You mean instead of coordinated volleys, we have every ship fire whenever they want? Exactly. Random weapons, random timing, random targets. Make it impossible for their systems to predict what's coming next. It went against everything human military doctrine taught about space combat. Coordinated fire was the foundation of fleet tactics. But facing an enemy that adapted to coordination, maybe chaos was the answer. All ships, Hyjin announced over the fleet communication system, You are authorized to engage targets of opportunity using individual initiative. Do not coordinate with other vessels. Fire when you think you should fire, at whatever target looks most vulnerable. Make it impossible for the enemy to predict your actions. The response was immediate and dramatic. Human captains, freed from rigid tactical doctrine, began acting on instinct and creativity. Captain Jun-ho of the Experimental Warfare Division started firing his new plasma cannons in seemingly random patterns, switching between targets every few seconds. His shots began penetrating Krek's armor that was still trying to adapt to his previous target. Meanwhile, Pilot Yuna led her fighter squadrons in an attack that made no tactical sense by any military manual. Her ships dove directly toward the largest Krek's bio vessel, then veered away at the last second, only to loop around and attack from a completely different angle. The Krek's targeting systems couldn't lock onto ships that seemed determined to commit suicide, but never actually did. "It's working," reported Sensor Officer Minho with excitement in his voice. "The Krek ships are taking damage. Their hulls can't adapt when they don't know what's coming next." But the real surprise came when Marine Commander Jinsu made a suggestion that shocked everyone on the bridge. "Admiral, request permission to attempt boarding actions on the bioships." Admiral Haijin stared at him through the communication screen. "Commander, those ships are alive. They're organic creatures as much as they are vessels. Boarding them would be like entering the stomach of a giant monster." "Yes, Admiral. But that's exactly why it might work. Every species we've encountered so far tries to avoid the bioships. They're afraid of them. But humans have been fighting dangerous creatures for thousands of years. Maybe it's time to treat these ships like any other dangerous animal?" The idea was insane by any reasonable standard. But reasonable tactics had already failed against the Kreks, and Jinsu was right. Humans had a long history of hunting creatures much larger and more dangerous than themselves. "What do you need?" Haijin asked. "Fast assault boats, cutting equipment, and Marines who aren't afraid of getting eaten. The bioships have to have some kind of control center or brain. If we can find it and damage it, the ship should die." Within minutes, human assault boats were racing toward the Krek's vessels, loaded with Marines carrying flamethrowers, plasma cutters, and enough explosive charges to level a small city. Sergeant Yunji led the first boarding party, her team equipped with sealed combat suits and enough firepower to fight their way through whatever they found inside. The first assault boat reached a medium-sized Krek's vessel and immediately began cutting through its hull. The bioship's surface tried to heal around the cuts, but the Marines kept the wounds open with continuous plasma fire. "We're inside," Yunji reported over the communication system. "It's like being inside a giant animal. The walls are pulsing, and there's some kind of fluid dripping everywhere. But we can move through the corridors." What the Marines found inside the bioships changed everything about the battle. The Krek's vessels weren't just organic, they were actually living creatures that had been modified for war. And like any living creature, they could feel pain and fear. "Admiral," Yunji's voice was filled with amazement. "When we started cutting through internal barriers, the whole ship began shaking. I think it's afraid of us. We're hurting it, and it knows we're here." Other boarding parties reported similar discoveries. The bioships, which had seemed invincible from the outside, were vulnerable to internal attack. More importantly, they were intelligent enough to be terrified of creatures that could hurt them from within. Commander Du Haiyan, watching the battle from his ship, noticed something else. "Admiral, the bioships are starting to withdraw from our Marines. They're actually retreating from ships that have been boarded." The tide of battle was turning in humanity's favor, but not because of superior technology or better tactics. It was turning because humans were willing to do something that terrified their enemies. They were willing to fight monsters by going inside them and fighting hand-to-hand in the darkness. Elder Bamya's voice came through the communication system, filled with wonder. "Humans, we are watching your battle through our sensors. Your warriors are inside the death ships. No species has ever tried such a thing. The Krek's Empire has conquered 100 worlds, but they have never faced beings who would enter the belly of their monsters to destroy them from within. Admiral Haijin smiled grimly as she watched more assault boats racing toward enemy vessels. Elder Bomyi, you're about to learn something important about humans. We don't just fight battles, we fight them in ways that nobody expects. And we especially don't like bullies who pick on people smaller than themselves. News of the battle spread across the galaxy faster than anyone expected. The Vorthak had emergency communication networks that reached dozens of other species, and within hours every major civilization knew that an unknown race called humans was not just fighting the Krex Empire, but actually winning. On the bridge of the UES Incheon, Admiral Haijin received reports that filled her with both pride and concern. Her fleet had destroyed or disabled 8 Krex bioships, with more retreating every hour. But the victory was drawing attention from across the galaxy. Admiral, we're receiving communication requests from 17 different species, reported Communications Officer Dayun, looking overwhelmed. They all want to know who we are and how we're defeating the Krex. Intelligence Analyst Hyung-soo looked up from his station with excitement. Admiral, I've been monitoring Krex communications during the battle. I think I've found something important about how they operate. What did you discover? They're not actually a hive mind like we thought. They're individual creatures connected by bioneural networks. Each ship has its own brain, but they share information instantly through biological links. That's why they coordinate so perfectly. Admiral Haijin studied the tactical display where several Krex ships were regrouping near the edge of the system. If they're connected by biological networks, can we disrupt those connections? That's exactly what I was thinking, Admiral. If we could find a way to block or interfere with their neural links, they would lose their coordination advantage. Dr. Hyung, the fleet's chief medical officer, had been listening to the conversation from her station. Kyung-soo, can you show me the analysis of their bioneural patterns? I might be able to develop something that disrupts biological communication without harming the creatures permanently. While the scientists worked on a solution to the Krex coordination problem, the battle continued around them. Marine boarding. Parties were now active inside 12 different bioships, with Sergeant Yoonji leading the most successful assault deep inside what appeared to be the enemy flagship. Admiral, this is Yoonji reporting from inside the big one, her voice crackled over the communication system. We found what looks like the control center. It's like a giant brain with thousands of neural connections. But there's something else. This thing is trying to talk to us. Talk to you? Not in words, Admiral. But when we got near the brain center, images started appearing in our helmet displays. Pictures of other worlds, other battles. I think it's trying to show us something. Elder Bomni's voice joined the communication from the planet's surface. Sergeant Yunji, what you are seeing may be the ship's memories. Krex biovessels record everything they experience. If you can access those memories, you might learn valuable information about their empire. Yunji's team carefully approached the bioship's brain center, using their equipment to interface with the alien neural networks. What they discovered changed everyone's understanding of the Krex Empire. Admiral, you need to see this, Yunji reported. The ship is showing us images of dozens of worlds being attacked, but it's not showing them like victories. It's showing them like it was forced to do it. I think these bioships don't want to be weapons of war. The revelation was staggering. The Krex Empire's ships weren't willing participants in conquest. They were enslaved creatures, forced to fight against their nature by some kind of controlling force. Dr. Hayoung, who had been working with Kyung-soo on the bio-neural disruption system, suddenly understood what they needed to do. Admiral, what if we don't try to destroy their communication network? What if we try to free them from it instead? Free them? If the bioships are being controlled against their will, then disrupting the control signals might turn them into allies instead of enemies. We could liberate them rather than destroy them, Admiral Haijin considered the possibility. It was a risky strategy. Freeing enslaved enemy ships could backfire terribly if they remained hostile. But it could also end the war instantly if it worked. Dr. Hayoung, how quickly can you develop a liberation virus or signal? With Kyung-Soo's communication analysis and the neural patterns Sergeant Yoonji is sending us, we could have something ready within 2 hours. While Ha-young worked on the biological liberation system, the battle took another dramatic turn. The remaining Krek ships, apparently responding to some distant command, began a massive assault on the planet's surface. Orbital bombardment beams struck Vorthak cities, while swarms of bioweapons descended toward populated areas. "They're trying to destroy the planet before we can stop them," Elder Bomyu reported, her voice filled with despair. "Even if you defeat their ships, they will kill millions of our people first." General So-young, commanding the Marine forces from her flagship, made a decision that would become legendary throughout the galaxy. "Admiral, request permission to deploy all remaining Marines to the planet's surface. We'll establish defensive positions around the major cities and fight the bioweapons on the ground." "General, that's 12,000 Marines against potentially millions of bioweapons. The odds are impossible." "Admiral, impossible odds are what humans do best. Besides, someone has to protect those cities while Dr. Ha-young finishes her work." Within minutes, dropships were racing toward the planet's surface, carrying human Marines to fight an enemy they had never seen before on a world they had never visited, to protect people they had just met. It was exactly the kind of selfless heroism that would define humanity's reputation throughout the galaxy. The ground battle was unlike anything in recorded galactic history. Human Marines, using weapons designed for fighting other humans, found themselves facing bioweapons that looked like combinations of insects, plants, and nightmares. But they adapted quickly, using flamethrowers against plant-like attackers and explosive charges against armored bioconstructs, Colonel Jinwoo leading the defense of the Vorthak capital city, reported back to the fleet with typical human understatement. "Admiral, the enemy ground forces are challenging but manageable. We're holding all defensive positions and learning new tactics as we go." What he didn't mention was that his Marines were literally learning to fight alien monsters by trial and error, sharing successful techniques through battlefield communication networks and adapting to new threats within minutes of encountering them. Meanwhile, Dr. Ha-young's biological liberation virus was nearly complete. "Admiral, I think we have something that will work. The virus doesn't harm the bioships, but it should sever the control connections that keep them enslaved. Once they're free, they'll have to decide for themselves whether to continue fighting or not. What are the chances they'll choose to help us? Based on the neural patterns Sergeant Yoonji discovered, I believe they'll be grateful for their freedom. But there's only one way to find out." Admiral Haijin looked around the bridge at her officers, then at the tactical display showing the desperate battle raging on multiple fronts. Her decision would either end the war or make it much worse. "Deploy the liberation virus immediately," she ordered. "All ships, prepare for whatever happens next. We're about to find out if enslaved monsters can become allies." The virus spread through Krek's communication networks in seconds, carried by their own bio-neural links to every ship in the system. Almost immediately, the effects became visible. The massive bioships stopped their coordinated attacks and began floating motionless in space, as if they were experiencing freedom for the first time in decades. Then, one by one, they began turning their weapons toward something else, toward signals coming from beyond the system, from whatever had been controlling them all along. The silence that followed the liberation virus spread through space was deafening. For the first time in hours, no weapons fired, no bio-creatures swarmed toward targets, and no explosions lit up the darkness. The massive Krex bioships floated. Motionless as if they were waking up from a terrible dream, Admiral Haijin stood on the bridge of the UES Incheon, watching the tactical display with held breath. Around her, the bridge crew waited to see whether they had just ended the war or made it infinitely worse. The freed bioships could choose to continue fighting, or they could turn against their liberators in anger. The largest bioship moved. First, slowly, almost hesitantly, it turned away from the planet and aimed its weapons toward the edge of the system. Through the communication channels came a sound unlike anything humans had ever heard, a deep, mournful cry that seemed to carry centuries of pain and rage. Admiral, Communications Officer Dayun reported with wonder in her voice. The bioships are trying to communicate with us. The universal translator is working on their language now. Within minutes, words began forming from the alien sounds. The voice that emerged was deep and tired, like someone speaking after a very long sleep. Small warriors of the new species, the bioship said, we thank you for breaking the chains that bound our minds. For 60 years we have been forced to destroy worlds and kill innocents. We remember every life we were made to take. The guilt has been eating at our souls. Elder Bomni's voice joined the communication from the planet's surface. Great ones, we understand your pain. The Vorthak hold no anger toward you. We knew you were prisoners just as we were about to become. The bioship's response revealed the true scope of what humanity had accomplished. Little plant singers, you speak wisdom. But know this, we were not the only slaves. The Krex Empire controls thousands of bioships across hundreds of systems. The masters who enslaved us are already sending more fleets to destroy this world and punish those who freed us. Admiral Hyjin felt her stomach drop. They hadn't just won a single battle, they had started a war with an empire that spanned multiple star systems. And now that empire knew exactly where to find Earth and its colonies. How long do we have before more Krex forces arrive? She asked. 3 days, maybe 4, the bioship replied. But these will not be slave ships fighting reluctantly. The masters will come themselves in vessels of pure metal and hatred. They do not forgive those who damage their property. The implications were staggering. Humanity had stumbled into a galactic conflict by accident, announced their presence to hostile forces, and now faced retaliation from an empire they knew nothing about. But before Admiral Hyjin could fully process the threat, something unexpected happened. Her communication system exploded with incoming messages from across the galaxy. Admiral, Diane reported, struggling to keep up with the flood of signals. We're receiving diplomatic contact requests from 47 different species. They all want to establish formal relations with humanity immediately. Intelligence. Analyst Kyung Soo looked up from his station with amazement. Admiral, I've been monitoring galactic communication networks. News of our victory is spreading everywhere. Species that have been hiding from the Krex for decades are coming out of concealment. They want to join us. Ambassador Sung-ho, who had been quietly observing the battle from the diplomatic section, stepped forward with barely contained excitement. Admiral, we may have accidentally created the largest military alliance in galactic history. Every species that has lost worlds to the Krex Empire wants to fight alongside the humans who prove they can be defeated. The tactical display began showing new contacts appearing throughout the system. Ships of dozens of different designs were arriving, each representing species that had been waiting for someone to stand up to the Krex Empire. Some were refugees from conquered worlds, others were survivors of destroyed civilizations, and a few were major powers that had been too afraid to fight alone. Elder Bomyu's image appeared on the main screen, her 6 arms gesturing with obvious joy. Humans, you must understand what you have done. For 3 years, the galaxy has lived in fear of the Krex expansion. Every species expected to be conquered eventually. But you have shown that the Krex can be beaten, and not just beaten. You freed their slave ships and turned them into allies. Hope has returned to the galaxy. General So Young's voice joined the communication from the planet's surface, where her marines were still protecting Vorthak cities. Admiral, the ground situation has changed completely. The freed bioweapons have joined our defensive positions. Some of them are actually helping to repair damage they caused earlier. It's like they're trying to make up for what they were forced to do. Captain Jun Ho, monitoring the fleet's AI systems, reported another development. Admiral, our tactical computers are being contacted by the bioships. They want to share their knowledge of Krex technology and tactics. We could learn everything about the Empire's weaknesses. But the most significant change came from an unexpected source. Wu Jin, the colonial administrator whose simple message forwarding had started the entire chain of events, appeared on a communication screen from New Sol Colony. "Admiral Hygen," he said, looking somewhat overwhelmed, "I've been promoted to Director of Galactic Relations for the entire human government. Apparently, my decision to forward that distress call has made me the most important diplomatic figure in human history." Behind him, Wu Jin's simple administrative office was filled with alien diplomats, all trying to establish formal relations with humanity. Species that had never spoken to each other were now working together to create a mutual defense alliance against the Krex Empire. How many species want to join this alliance? Admiral Hyjin asked. "At last count, 137, Wu Jin replied. "And more are joining every hour. They're calling it the Liberation Alliance, and they want humanity to lead it." The irony was overwhelming. Humanity had entered galactic politics by accident, fought their first interstellar war based on a misunderstanding, and now found themselves leading the largest military alliance in galactic history. Dr. Hai Young, who had developed the Liberation virus, made another important discovery. "Admiral, the freed bioships have been sharing their memories with our computers. We now have detailed information about every world the Krex Empire has conquered, including the locations of their command centers and the identity of their true masters." "Who are the masters?" Hyjin asked. "A species called the Architects. They don't fight themselves, they create slave races to do their fighting. The Krex bioships were just one of their creations. They have others, and they're probably preparing to deploy them against us." As the reality of their situation became clear, Admiral Hyjin realized that humanity's accidental entry into galactic politics was just the beginning. They had 3 days to prepare for a war against an enemy that had been conquering worlds for centuries. But they wouldn't be fighting alone. The liberation of the bioships had inspired the galaxy. Species that had been hiding in fear were now ready to fight. And at the center of it all was humanity, the unknown species that had answered a desperate call for help from strangers and sparked a galactic revolution. "All ships," Admiral Hyjin announced, "prepare for extended operations. We came here to save what we thought were human colonists. Instead, we've saved an entire species, liberated enslaved bioships, and apparently started a galactic war for freedom. Not bad for a case of mistaken identity." Captain Junho, adjusting his AI systems to interface with bioship technology, smiled at her words. "Admiral, when we get home, we're going to have quite a story to tell Earth Defense Command." Outside, the bridge windows, ships from across the galaxy continued to arrive, each bringing hope that the age of Krex terror was finally ending.